Hi, I'm Lisa from Australian travel and migration blog dreamingofdownunder.com, and today I'm going to talk about the things that surprised me when I moved to Sydney. I moved to Australia from the UK in 2015 and I've lived in Sydney for just over 5 years. And even though I'd been here before as a backpacker, I'd never really spent very long here, so there were still a lot of things that surprised me after I'd lived here for a while. Most of them are good things, but even the bad things wouldn't put me off enough to stop me living here. It's still my favourite city in the world. So here are 15 things that surprised me when I moved to Sydney. Number 1 is the number of beaches in Sydney. Everyone's heard of Bondi and probably Manly, but actually there are over 100 beaches in Sydney. Sydney has a really long craggy coastline that's just packed with beaches and sandstone headlands. So the eastern suburbs where Bondi is has over 20 beaches along the ocean and in the harbour. Then you've got beaches down in South Sydney on Botany Bay and Cronulla, you've got Bundeena, you've got the northern beaches which have lots and lots of beaches up the ocean side as well as down the Pittwater side. You've got beaches in Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park, there's absolutely loads. I've heard expats saying that all the beaches here are really packed, but they've only really been to the big tourist beaches, so you can find an empty beach if you want to. Number 2 is how much of Sydney is on the water. Obviously with that many beaches there's a lot of water, but there's also lots of rivers and bays and coves and inlets, so a lot of the housing is built on hills overlooking the water. When I had a friend come and visit me from home, she was really surprised about how much of Sydney is water based. Number 3 is ocean pools. This is something that I've only seen in Sydney and New South Wales. A lot of the time on the beaches, there's a part of the ocean sectioned off with a wall so you can swim in it. So you've got a calm area that you can do lap swimming if you want, with no sharks. Surprise number 4 is how rainy it is in Sydney. In terms of the volume of rainfall per year, Sydney is the second wettest city after Darwin out of the state capitals, and it has the most rainy days out of all the state capitals. More than double the amount of rainy days than Melbourne. However, it has double the number of sunny days that Melbourne has on average per year, so you don't get as much overcast, dry weather. It just tends to be very clear for a long time and then pour with rain. That does mean that Sydney looks nice and green compared to a lot of the other drier cities like Adelaide. Surprise number 5 is how cold the winters are in Sydney. In the winter, in the daytime, it's generally 16 to 18 degrees, which sounds quite warm, but for some reason it feels a lot colder than that does in England. So in winter, generally people wear coats and scarves. Overnight, it drops down to single figures and the houses don't usually have heating or insulation, so it can get really cold inside. I use a little plug-in heater for my bedroom for at least half the year. And in the Blue Mountains to the west of Sydney, they actually get snow in the winter sometimes. Surprise number 6 is how much greenery and nature there is in Sydney. This really surprised me. It's actually full of national parks and forests. You've got rainforest, you've got bushland, you've got miles and miles of coastal walks and cliffs. I was so surprised when I first got here. I joined a walking group. We just went to the north side of the river opposite the city and there was natural bushland there and hikes. I really couldn't believe that. You tend to come to Sydney as a visitor and stay in the city and maybe visit Bondi and Manly and Palm Beach and just assume that Sydney is mostly really urban, but it's very different from that. If you want to spend every weekend hiking in Sydney, you could without even leaving the city. Surprise number 7 is how hilly Sydney is. I didn't realise that where I came from in the UK was so flat until I moved to Sydney. I would definitely never have a bike here. I don't think I could cope with it. So generally just behind the beaches the land is flat, but then you've got really elevated headlands and a lot of hilly areas inland too. So it's actually really nice because a lot of the housing has really nice views of water or the sea. Where I live in the northern beaches is really hilly, so some of the roads are really steep kind of mountain roads with hairpin bends. A lot of the driveways are really steep. Also the very big houses that have long steep driveways, it's so far to the house from the roadside that some of them have inclinators, which are like little cable cars on tracks. And because the houses are built into the hills, they can often have multi-tiered gardens, or some of the houses have an extra floor just on the front or back of the house, depending on which way the hill is going. Surprise number 8 is how sparse the train line is. You would think with such a really big major city that you could pretty much get anywhere in the city by train. Sydney doesn't have an underground system like London, and the train line doesn't go down the eastern suburbs beaches or the northern beaches either. So you can get everywhere by public transport really, but you'd often have to rely on the bus or ferries. Number 9 is how rarely I need to go into the city. In the UK, if you need to go clothes shopping or go out for a drink, you would really always go into the city centre. You would never just go to your kind of local small shopping area. In Sydney, it's really different. It's known as the city of villages, and a lot of the suburbs have really nice high streets with lovely independent cafes and nice restaurants, sometimes boutique shops as well. So if you're meeting friends in the daytime or just for a meal, it's quite common to just go to your local area instead of having to go into the city. Also, if you're going clothes shopping, there are malls everywhere, so they have free parking for 3 hours and it's air conditioned, so it's a lot nicer than walking around the city on a hot day. So if you're moving here and you're not working in the city, don't think that you need to be close to the city to access everything, because you'll probably find what you need anywhere across the city really. Number 10 is how safe Sydney is. For such a huge city, you would expect a lot more crime, but I've house sat in over 70 suburbs and I didn't know anything about the suburbs before I got there, and I've never ended up anywhere that I felt was rough or unsafe. There's nowhere in Sydney that I'd be scared to go to by myself. It's a really lovely city to be in. Number 11 is the extortionate house prices. Obviously, with so much going for it, a lot of people want to live in Sydney, and I didn't realise quite how high the house prices were. When you compare the median salaries in Sydney compared to the median house prices, it's one of the most expensive cities in the world. I think it's more expensive than LA and New York. For the price of my old 3-bedroom house in the UK, I would only get a studio in Sydney, and houses, the average house price is well over $1 million now. Perth and Brisbane, for example, are about half the price of Sydney for housing. Where I live in the Northern Beaches, because of COVID, lots of people have relocated to the beaches because they don't need to go into the city, and the houses have gone up over 50% in 12 months there. Number 12 is how early people get up here. It's a really health conscious city, and obviously with the weather, lots of people want to get up and make the most of the day. So if you go to the beach at 6 a.m, it'll be full of people running, surfing, swimming, doing boot camp classes. It's a totally different world to in the UK. I used to struggle to get up at 7 with an alarm in the UK, whereas here I'd get up at 6 or 6:30 without needing an alarm at all. When I moved into a share house for a while, I was quite worried that people might be up late making loads of noise, and everyone was in bed by 9. And when I said that to somebody who lived locally, she said, yeah, the whole suburb's pretty much in bed by 9 o'clock. Number 13 is how many really lovely old buildings there are in Sydney. You think of Australia as being a really modern country in terms of the European settlement, but actually a lot of Sydney was built in the 19th century, so there's loads of really lovely Victorian buildings and Federation era buildings, so the city has lovely old buildings, and a lot of the homes are really nice too. I've done another video on the housing styles in Australia, so if that interests you, take a look. Number 14 is that Sydney gets bushfires. So I didn't realise how forested Sydney is, which unfortunately means that it does get bushfires. Even if the fires are far away, the smoke travels really far, so even the city centre can get really, really smoky when there are bushfires. When we had the really bad bushfires a couple of years ago in Australia, ash was literally falling from the sky all across the city. Thankfully this summer's been really rainy because we've got La Nina, so it definitely beats bushfires. Number 15 is snakes. I really didn't think that you would get snakes in a city, but unfortunately you do. You're really, really unlikely to see one, but in the bushier areas you do get them. There was one in the garden in my house in Avalon Beach when I lived up there. Also, I remember doing a house sit and somebody showed me a picture of a huge python that they'd found in the garden when they moved in. They had to get it removed. Okay, that's it for my top things that surprised me about Sydney. Let me know in the comments if you're moving to Sydney or if you already live here and there are extra things you'd like to add. Please like and subscribe for more videos on life in Australia. Thanks for watching.